So a lot of the critics over at Rotten Tomatoes are notorious for not really liking horror movies all that much. So today I'm going to go through how Rotten Tomatoes ranks the entire Friday the 13th franchise and whether or not I agree with it. So if you're not really that familiar with how Rotten Tomatoes kind of scores their movies in a way, they have kind of like the fresh and then the rotten status for their movies. And essentially when at least 60% of the reviews for a movie are positive, then you'll see a red tomato next to the movie and it indicates that that movie is fresh. When less than 60% of the reviews for a movie are positive, then you'll see like the green splatter thing, and it means that the movie is basically rotten on the website. So, only one Friday the 13th movie in the entire franchise on Rotten Tomatoes website is actually a fresh status. So, stay tuned till the end to find out what that movie is. This ranking will be sorted by lowest tomato meter score to the highest tomato meter score. So let's just jump right into it. How the hell does Rotten Tomatoes rank the Friday the 13th franchise? Well, coming in at number 12 and in last place is going to be Friday the 13th Part 3 from 1982 with a 7% tomato meter. And I think the biggest difference between tomato meter and audience score in the entire franchise, 42% audience score. So a pretty big difference. Clearly, the audience, people who have seen the movie, who aren't necessarily, critics or certified on Rotten Tomatoes, enjoy the movie a lot more than the people who are, so-called critics in a sense. And for Part 3, the critics' consensus goes like this. It says, Jason may solidify his iconic wardrobe in this entry, but Friday the 13th Part 3 lacks any other distinguishing features, relying on a tired formula of stab and repeat. I mean, I don't think Part 3 is the worst movie in the franchise. Some would definitely put it there, clearly. Yes, this is the movie where Jason finally gets his mask. This is, of course, like a big, towering version of Jason. Definitely like a lumbering version. He walks around and is like, well, on to the next kill, right? When he's walking along the dock. But, and of course, it's a very sad excuse for a Crystal Lake in this movie. And obviously, this is the Friday the 13th 3D movie. So a lot of the production was interrupted, messed with. The flow of the actors, the flow of everything, just everybody was getting annoyed with the 3D aspect of the movie, trying to get certain shots, with yo-yos or other things, throwing a wallet into the camera, just having to do take after take after take. Definitely pissed a lot of people off in the production, was costly, and was more of a focus in this movie than, the script, some of the kills, other things like that. But I do think this, Part 3 has one of the best final girls in the franchise. I like the cabin where it's set at. That's a fun setting. Some of the kills, are ridiculous. Yeah, the characters, you got like the stoner, you got the nerd, you've got the movie guy, you've got the hot girl, you've got the jock. The characters, very similar to Friday the 13th movies just in general are, they hit the status quo for that and are a little cheesy, of course. Is it the best movie in the franchise? No, not at all. There's definitely a lot of bad things in this movie, a lot of things that are just tedious, that are, they don't hit the normal beats that you would expect in a Friday the 13th franchise. It's definitely one of the least scary movies in the franchise. But, you get some fun kills. Jason gets his hockey mask. Last place, I wouldn't really agree with that. On to number 11, we've got Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, in second to last place with an 11% on the tomato meter and a 26% audience score. So the critics' consensus for Jason Takes Manhattan goes like this. Jason terrorizes a ship and nearly sinks the franchise in a clunky sequel that feels like a self-parody without the charm. There's some charm in this movie. I mean, if you have any nostalgia for the 90s, there's definitely some 90s charm. I mean, what 90s movie didn't portray New York City as like the greasiest, slimiest slum where people are just like doing heroin on every corner. You know, it's just like that grungy 90s feel. So, I mean, there's some charm with this movie, definitely. I mean, the look of Jason is great, in my opinion. The yellower mask, you know, he's like all like, you know, this is the Jason. He's become this like slimy, dirty version, which is great. When he gets his mask off, you know, that gets knocked off, of course. Does he look silly and ridiculous? Yeah, but it's cool. It's one of the cooler looking Jasons, in my opinion, in this franchise. Yeah, I mean, how much time does he spend in Manhattan? Of course, like, it's misleading marketing. Yeah, very little time in Manhattan, but there's still like the cool shot in Times Square. You've got the cool sequence where he goes into, what is it, the diner, and starts causing some shit in there. And then there's just some cheesy 90s stuff on the boat as well, which is a good time. You know, there's some funny kills. Obviously, the boxing kill where he knocks the guy's head off. You know, he beats the girl with the guitar when she's shredding in like the bottom of the boat for some damn reason. But I mean, Jason Takes Manhattan. You know, I can understand why people have it last on the list. I can understand why people maybe have it in their top 5. If you have it as your number 1 movie in the franchise, you're a goddamn maniac. I still love you, but damn, you're a maniac. Beautiful, but you're crazy. But number 11, I mean, I could see why people would have it as number 11, you know? Does it nearly sink the franchise? I would say that. I mean, I get the, you know, the joke there, but I would probably say that about other movies in this franchise instead, who just take it way off. So, Manhattan still hits some of the beats that you would expect in a Friday the 13th franchise, right? All right, on to number 10. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, from 1993, with a 16% on the tomato meter, 23% audience score. So, a little bit of a difference there. You're noticing a trend here, you know? Like a lot of horror movies compared to Rotten Tomatoes scores. We love them. But the critics, not so much, right? So yeah, Jason Goes to Hell. Man, so this movie actually didn't have a critics consensus on the website. So instead, I'm going to give you guys a little gift and read some of the critics' actual reviews instead, because they're damn hilarious. So, all right. Critic review, first one, and I'll leave them unnamed, you know? Fine, I'll do that. The first critic says, if Jason Goes to Hell had been a standalone film, it might have worked. As a Friday the 13th movie, it sucks. A lot of people say that. Doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th movie, you know? Because you got Jason swapping bodies. For most of the movie, you're not getting Jason with his mask. You're not getting really anything you would expect here. But it goes out on a limb. You might think about Halloween Ends a little bit when you think about Jason Goes to Hell in some ways. All right, another critic review goes something like this. This is actually exactly what they say. The film suffers from bad continuity, sloppy editing, bland acting, ridiculous plot developments, and cardboard characters. It is also the most grotesque film in the series. Grotesque? Come on, bud. This is Friday the 13th, baby. Grotesque is what we do, all right? Lay off, man. But yeah, bland acting, yeah, of course. I mean, but that's across the board in the franchise for the most part. Not always, but ridiculous plot developments. I mean, yes, of course, you've got some just crazy things happening with Creighton Duke and some of the other characters. You're just like, what is going on? Where are we going? What is this journey we're going on? But cardboard characters, just look at the people that work at the diner. Come on. With the Jason hamburgers and stuff, like cardboard characters. But next critic review. So, and this one's actually fresh. This person thought this movie was fresh, enjoyed the movie for sure. They said, although it may not be a good Friday the 13th movie by whatever strange standards that is reckoned, Jason Goes to Hell works reasonably well on its own terms as a supernatural thriller. A lot of people, feel that way. They feel like if this wasn't a Friday the 13th movie and they just removed Jason's mask and any link to the franchise, that this would be like, more of a cult classic, a more beloved movie, just because for its obscurity, just how weird it is, The next critic says it's a very, 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 very Sorry, it's very, very, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 varies. It's very, 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 very stupid, is what they said. All right, coming in at number 9, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is going to be Friday the 13th, A New Beginning from 1985. So obviously the fake Jason, the Halloween 3 in the franchise, 18% tomato meter and 26% audience score. So A New Beginning ahead of Jason Goes to Hell, Jason Takes Manhattan, and Part 3. Yeah, I mean, okay, all right. I give this movie a lot of love, a lot more love than I think some people give it, just for, how brutal it is, just how, like, I mean, it doesn't have Jason in it, but it's still fun. Like, it's basically Jason, come on. So this one also didn't have any critic consensus, kind of description, so we are going to get into the old critic reviews again. So first one says, yet despite these changes, the film quickly ends up feeling much of the same and a lackluster version of that. So, all right, the next dude certified Part 5 as fresh and said, the worst Jason story, but the best nudity of the entire series. All right, we got a tip man in the chat. All right. Critic loves his boobies. And the next one, also certified fresh for The New Beginning, said, if you're curious about classic 80s horror and need a gateway into the genre, though, this should be the first movie you check out. I mean, it depends how young you are, you know what I mean? Like, it's basically a porn in the woods. Well, the earlier cut of the movie before it was cut down definitely was, apparently. But, I mean, it could be a gateway into the genre. I could see that. It's definitely, it feels 80s in every sort of way. It's got some solid kills, ridiculous characters, some schlockiness. Next critic says, this one had potential, but largely blows it. Get it? All right, moving on. At number 8, according to Rotten Tomatoes, is going to be Jason X from 2002. Damn, can you believe that? Jason X at number 8, above all of those, with a 20% tomato meter, 25% audience score. So audience score is close to the tomato meter, getting very, very close. So the critic consensus for Jason X was Jason goes to the future, but the story is still stuck in the past. Since the critic consensus is kind of lame, let's read a few reviews. First review says, whatever they paid Canadian horror auteur David Cronenberg to appear in this godforsaken mess, it wasn't enough. All right, whatever you believe, that's fine. The next critic rated Jason X as fresh and said the original films were cheap and nasty. A bit like a venereal disease, I suppose. If you're confused like I am about that review, let me just read it one more time. And keep in mind, he rated it fresh. The original films were cheap and nasty, a bit like a venereal disease, I suppose. I don't know what that has to do with this movie, but cool, man. Good talk. You should probably get that looked at. It burns sometimes. The next critic review, there's not a single jump in your seat moment. And believe it or not, Jason actually takes a backseat in his own film to special effects. You could make an argument for that, for sure. There's a lot of corny, like green screen special effects in this movie, but that adds to the charm, of course. That makes it just so silly. It's good. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, there's a lot of special effects. It definitely kind of, there are moments in Jason X where I wish there was more Jason, more brutality, more revenge. I'm going to read one more. And this is certified, or this is fresh as well. This critic review for Jason X. A movie that's just plain awful, but still manages to entertain on a guilty pleasure. So bad it's funny level. Hell yeah, I agree with that. But damn, Jason X at number 8. It's interesting. I might have it in a similar spot. I'm not going to lie. Just because it goes for something, it gives you that like straight to sci-fi movie kind of a feel. It definitely feels like 2002. Number 7 is going to be Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter. Damn. At number 7, can you believe that? One of the most beloved movies in the franchise, a movie a lot of people, some of you out there watching right now are like, I have this movie number 1. So The Final Chapter, 21% tomato meter, 51% audience score. Kind of crazy, right? So You know, people who love the genre, people who love the franchise, love the final chapter for its grittiness, its version of Jason, this mean, you know, version of Jason who is still like human. This is the last, you guess, sort of human version of Jason. Good kills. Obviously, you've got, you know, Tommy Jarvis in this one as well. You've got, you know, a good cast of characters that are silly, but also fun at the same time. A good mix of like fun, silliness, good kills, a good setting. You know, after the shitty Camp Crystal Lake, actual lake in part 3, in part 4, it's a little bit better. But the critics' consensus for the final chapter is as lumberingly single-minded as its homicidal star. Friday the 13th, the final chapter adds another rote entry to an increasingly labored franchise. I mean, I think the final chapter encapsulates kind of what everything that's good about the first 3 movies and puts it into one movie in some ways. You know, you get like the great locations with the 2 houses, the rain and the thunder at the end gives you, you know, that sort of a vibe, a creepiness to it. Some decent jump scares. Like I said, a good Jason, good final girl, Tommy Jarvis, Corey Feldman, of course. Like, come on. Number 7 for the final chapter, I disagree with that. I don't know what the hell you're smoking, tomato meter. Coming in at number 6, Friday the 13th, the remake. Well, not really, but 2009, Friday the 13th from 2009, the movie that kind of encapsulates the first 4, 25% tomato meter, 47% audience score. So audience, again, loves the movie way more than the tomato meter and the critics. Critic consensus is going to be, though technically well constructed, Friday the 13th is a series rehash that features little to distinguish it from its predecessors. I would disagree with that, though. I mean, you know, this came out in 2009. You know, this was during a time where we were getting like these bigger, menacing, more brutal, like main antagonists in movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and movies in like Halloween, like the Rob Zombie franchise, which I enjoy. They're not necessarily my favorite portrayals of Leatherface and Michael and Jason, but they're up there as some of my favorite, you know? So that's kind of a new flavor. Yes, we do have some other Jasons in the franchise that are big and menacing, but there's something about the Jason in the 2009 remake that he's brutal, dude. He's like a expert woodsman who knows what he's doing around the woods and around the camp, and, you know, like can shoot arrows and is kind of fast and brutal. And yeah, it's got good characters. It's got pretty good acting, but the movie knows what it is. It's like trying to lean into the whole like American Pie type of a feel with some brutality and just a good time. So I don't disagree necessarily with it being number 6, but little to distinguish it from its predecessors. Yeah, it sticks to the Friday the 13th Bible, but adds some new, fresh things for sure. It looks great. It's the cinematographer is Daniel Pearl, who was cinematographer on the Texas Chainsaw remake, was a cinematographer on the original Texas Chainsaw, and yeah, it makes the movie look great too. So anyways, that's number 6. So actually number 4 and 5 are a tie according to Rotten Tomatoes. Both at 33% on the tomato meter is going to be Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood from 1988, and Friday the 13th Part 2 from 1981. Hot damn. So let's talk about The New Blood first. So the critic consensus on The New Blood is as lumbering and bereft of conscious thought as its unstoppable star. Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood, finds the franchise in desperate need of the title ingredient. Yeah, the movie was cut down a lot. There's a lot of kills that just cut away. There's a lot of kills off screen that you could tell were like gonna be pretty damn fun, of course. But there's still some gore here. There's still some fun kills, in my opinion, in The New Blood. Yeah, I don't love the final girl. She's definitely not one of my favorite final girls. I think she's pretty annoying at times. I don't love the whole Carrie superpower thing. It kind of creates this environment where it's like you don't have to really outsmart Jason or outsmart the situation. You can just use your Jedi mind tricks to kind of get through things, but she kicks ass. I mean, she's definitely the most powerful final girl in the franchise. Jason gets the shit beaten at him towards the end of the movie. There's some fun moments there. Kane Hodder playing Jason is fun. The setting's pretty fun too. You got some characters you also hate, like the Doctor, so it's fun to see him get killed. You know, The New Blood, would I have it as number 4 or number 5? Me? No. But, you know, there's some things to like here. So, yep. But damn, part 2? You know, like technically it could be at number 5? Oof. I mean, it is top 5. Man, I'm a sucker for part 2 though. Sackhead Jason, great. But before I get into that, let's read the consensus, all right? Friday the 13th Part 2 sets the template for the franchise to follow with more teen victims, more gruesome set pieces, and fewer reasons to keep following along. I would goddamn disagree with that, all right? Gives me a million reasons to keep following along. Yeah, I mean, after watching Part 2, I mean, that was one of the movies that I watched early on in the franchise when I was watching the entire franchise, and it definitely established me as even more of a fan of the franchise. The first Friday the 13th movies, I think if I remember correctly, I was exposed to were ones, you know, on reruns in the 90s and the 2000s, you know, like Freddy vs. Jason, Jason X, what else? I think occasionally we would see The New Blood here and there, you know, on HBO or whatever. But part 2, I like this version of Jason. He's more of a believable like character. Of course, this is the first entry in the franchise with our Jason that we expect. He's dirty. He's got like the dirty fingernails that are all bruised up. It's definitely got some Halloween vibes to it. You've got some POV shots in here still, just like the original from 1980. Obviously Ginny's in it. The final girl, many people consider their favorite in the franchise. I've ranked the final girls. Ginny is my favorite final girl in the franchise. That could change, you know, week to week, month to month. My top 3 kind of can be a little interchangeable, but Ginny's great. Paul is great too. Enjoy Paul. And the rest of the cast is fun. It's one of the best settings in the franchise for sure. Arguably the best camp setting, which is just a blast. I'm still pissed that they built over that camp. But part 2's great. Part 2's great. They have it in their top 5, so okay, sure. Coming in at number 3. I mean, process of elimination, you can already kind of guess where I'm getting at here, but coming in at number 3, Freddy vs. Jason from 2003, with a 42% on the tomato meter, 50% audience score. So yeah, I mean, Freddy vs. Jason, definitely a movie. Well, let's read this consensus. Fans of the 2 horror franchise will enjoy this showdown, but for everyone else, it's the same old slice and dice. Well, definitely, I mean, yeah, that's a true statement, I would say, for the most part. Definitely, I mean, a big, menacing, brutal Jason, you know, similar to the 2009. One of the more lifeless Jasons in some ways to me. It, for me, feels more robotic. But yeah, definitely still a really fun Jason, you know, definitely has some brutality. He's just like huge, so he just fucks people up in moments, you know. He's twisting that guy's head around in the farm. He's doing some fun stuff here. Obviously, we have Freddy in that. We're not going to talk about Freddy too much because this is more of a Friday the 13th thing, but it's fun having Freddy in there, of course. This movie is, I remember watching this movie with my dad and my brother, and they were like, damn. Holy shit. There were moments where they were literally just like gasping out loud and literally saying, holy shit, because this movie is, in a lot of ways, it's dark. It's brutal. I remember when they saw the kill with the guy getting folded up in the bed early on in the movie with the beer in his hand. Both of them were just like, oh my, they were laughing so hard because it was not only a damn good kill, but just brutal. And this movie, yeah, is just dark and brutal and feels very 2003. I've got some nostalgia for it. Would I have Freddy vs. Jason in my top 3? I mean, I kind of like the charm of the versions from the 80s, probably a bit more, but I still really like Freddy vs. Jason. Definitely. It's a fun one. It's a fun one. And of course, you get Freddy in it too, so it's a little cherry on top. And pretty fun final girl, and you know, like a fun cast with some characters who are you want to watch, you want to see survive, and then characters you really want to see get killed, which is a good formula. Like that. So, all right, the top 2 now. Here we go. So coming in at number 2 is going to be Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives from 1986. 53% on the tomato meter, and 53% audience score. So one of the favorites in the franchise, without a doubt. Many people's favorite movie in the franchise. This is definitely the movie that feels like, very blockbuster in a lot of ways, which actually didn't have a huge budget. They stretched that budget pretty well. Similar budget to some of the other movies that felt way smaller. All right, let's get into the consensus before we get into all that. Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives, indeed brings back old Voorhees, along with a sense of serviceable, brain-dead fun. So, you got zombie Jason in this movie, and yeah, this movie is, when I go back and watch this movie, I'm actually surprised how good the kills are, because I remember this movie kind of being toned down, almost like it would be a PG-13 movie in some ways. I mean, they definitely lean into just making it fun, not like really dark, not really gruesome. I think it's the only movie in the franchise with no nudity. So there's some cases where you're just like, is this PG-13? But then when you see the kills, you're like, okay. The kills in this movie are pretty damn good. They don't have necessarily like my favorite kill in the franchise, but they're just solid across the board. I think the kills are just good and solid overall. It's a fun movie. I mean, I have no problem with this movie being ranked number 2 at all. It's a good time. You just get a ton of Jason in this movie too. That's one thing when I go back and watch it, I'm like, man, Jason's in this movie a lot. So different than Jason Goes to Hell. Like there's lingering shots on Jason. You're always seeing what he looks like, what the mask looks like, what's kind of underneath the mask a little bit, from the side, and different weapons that he's using. You see Jason a lot, like in the light, which I don't mind, right? I don't mind. Some people criticize A Nightmare on Elm Street 2 for showing Freddy so much. But I don't mind that in that movie either. And like this movie, I don't mind it in Jason Lives. It's fun. It's just a good time. He's got some funny one-liners in this movie, of course. You've got a good ending too. Final Girl is great. Tommy Jarvis is one of my favorite Tommy Jarvises in the franchise. Definitely. Maybe my favorite, actually. This is the Tommy Jarvis I think of when I think of Tommy, with the iconic jacket. But the good ending, trying to sink Jason at the bottom of the lake. Megan comes and saves Tommy at the end of the movie, which is a good time and all that. So yeah. No problem with Jason Lives being number 2 on the list. So obviously by process of elimination, coming in at number 1 is going to be Friday the 13th, the original from 1980, 66% on the tomato meter, the only fresh movie in the franchise, and a 60% audience score. So the audience score a little lower than the tomato meter, which I think is the only one in the franchise that has that. Which is not surprising. There's actually quite a few people where this just isn't their cup of tea. I'm surprised it's actually 60%. And I'm definitely surprised it's 66% on the tomato meter. I'm definitely surprised by that. Because I'm always a little bit interested to hear what people think about the original Friday, because there's so many people who this is like their hot take in the horror franchise or horror genres. They don't like this movie or they think it's boring or whatever. I love this movie. I really do. This is probably the coziest Friday the 13th movie in the franchise that I put on just to give me some cozy vibes, kind of, on a rainy day. It's just a good time. Kevin Bacon's in the movie. The characters are fun. It's got so much charm, so much 80s charm to it. The camp, obviously. This is Crystal Lake. The Crystal Lake we've come to love in this movie, which is great. The killer in the movie, I mean, of course, Jason's mom, Pamela, one of my favorite horror villains of all time. The end with her when she shows up. Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees. It's so good. It's so sinister. It's just, when I think about it, it just puts a smile on my face. The critic consensus for the original Friday is rather quaint by today's standards. Friday the 13th still has its share of bloody surprises and a 70s holdover aesthetic to slightly compel. And I agree. I do. That's a good way to put it, actually. Has that little bit of that 70s aesthetic to it, which I love. I love slashers from the 70s. So that's probably a big reason why I'm a sucker for the original Friday. I get it when people say it's boring, they don't like it. I get it. I know we get to watch our final girl make coffee for, what seems like forever, but still. I enjoy this movie, man. It is a great entry in the franchise. Arguably the scariest movie in the franchise. It's so primal. A mom on a revenge tour that you can almost sympathize in a way, It's like a mama bear killing people. One of her cubs was killed and she's on a revenge tour, right? it's like, damn, you know, if that happened to your kid, you'd probably go a little crazy too, right? But great movie. Do I have a problem with it being number one in the franchise? The movie that kicked off the entire franchise, the movie that was clearly ripped off from Halloween, but still held its own somehow. Yeah, the score, the iconic Friday score is clearly ripped off from Psycho, but still. Number one, would I have Friday the 13th, 1980 as number one? It's a great question. I probably wouldn't have it as number one, but that changes week to week, month to month, just because I love this franchise. So I have no problem with it being number one. There's some months where I would have it number one. There's some months where I'd have it number five, just depending on the mood. But I actually love that it's number one. That makes me happy. So still some love out there for 1980. I think there's like a loud minority on YouTube, especially with YouTubers, and no shade. Everyone's opinion is great. I have no problem. You deserve your opinion and I deserve my opinion. But I think there's kind of a loud minority on YouTube. People saying that the original is not good. But I think overall, just horror fans who aren't involved with YouTube, just the general audience that watches horror movies out there, especially people who, you know, maybe saw this in the theater, really love this movie. And I'm one of those people who didn't see it in the theater. It's just a great movie. It's just a classic. It's an all-time classic without a doubt. But anyways, everybody, thanks for watching my reaction to how Rotten Tomatoes ranks the Friday the 13th franchise. If you're like me, I could give two shits usually about what Rotten Tomatoes thinks about movies, just because I've been burned so many times from Rotten Tomatoes. You know, no shade to what they do over there, but there's so many times where I see a movie that's rated really, really high on Rotten Tomatoes with a lot of reviews, and I watch it and I'm like, really? How? How is that even possible? And then there's movies that are rated really, really low, and I love them. They're classics. So yeah, you know, take what Rotten Tomatoes says with a grain of salt, but still, it's fun to go and see how they rank franchises like Friday the 13th, which is a franchise that I love. So I would obviously have my scores a lot higher than this because I love this franchise. I have the Blu-rays. But anyways, everybody, if you enjoy Friday the 13th content like this, make sure you subscribe because I have a ton of Friday the 13th content on the channel and a lot more coming, you know, in the years to come, definitely. But thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.